learn from each other. If the roles are reversed, it's Jason Kidd, we assist one another. Making strides for a ship in the regular season. Lacing up these nights, a band of brothers turning into some demons. Through the season, spring to fall, we gon' see who is working. When the winter hit the surface, gon' see who deserve it. Left competition in the dust, now the options deserted. Only lions in my circle, we hungry for purpose. Nothing's given all these see that I earned them. Can't fuck the system, take the knowledge that you study and learn it. We as strong as the weakest, 1 through 12 is equal. Tried to trap me, saw it now, I had to thread the needle. I had to thread the needle, try erase and draw it up, just trying to see my youngins eating. Yeah, I had to thread the needle, try erase and draw it up, just trying to see my youngins eating.
All right, welcome to another episode of the Coach's Show. Today our guest is Coach Chris Bohlen from Montgomery County at Paint Branch High School. What's going on, Coach? How you doing?
Going on, fellas? How you guys doing? Hope everybody's weathering this storm.
Hey, what's going on?
Yeah, so well, say thank you to Coach Bohlen, man, for coming on, man. We really appreciate you, especially in these times, man, where we have a lot of time on our hand, and likewise, missing our kids and missing work, but spending a great time with our family and our loved ones. So that's also a plus as well. So I hope all is safe with you. Yeah,
definitely a silver lining, getting to spend more time with the family, unplug a little bit, kind of sit back and evaluate what's really important to everybody. And it's definitely a time you can certainly grow out of it as long as you're looking at it from that kind of standpoint.
All right, yeah. So we already prepared our pregame speeches, man. The coaches are ready to jump ball with the questions, man. I hope you're ready to rock and roll, and I know you are because you're my guy. Our first question coming from Coach Desmond Small at Washington Venice University.
Hey, what's going on, Coach Bohlen, man? Appreciate you coming on.
What's going on, my man?
You my guy. Fun fact, before we start the question, Coach Bohlen was one of the first guys that got me into high school coaching, giving me an opportunity to coach his Wooten Summer League team. We went to the championship, by the way. He was one of the first coaches that ever believed in me.
Squirrels find nuts every now and then.
Yeah. So he the first coach that ever gave me an opportunity to coach in high school. So I appreciate that. A lot of people don't know that. But we're going to jump right into it. I know a lot about you from building and you being one of my mentors and guys that always looked out for me. But to everybody else, could you share your journey through basketball, how you became a coach, like where you played at, the whole nine, just so people can kind of get a background about you? Yeah,
real quick. It's a long journey, but I grew up in the Northeast. My dad's family is originally from New York City, so I cut my teeth coaching up there. I was lucky enough after I graduated I went to the University of Notre Dame. After I graduated from Notre Dame, I was lucky enough to get on the staff with Gary DeCesar, who was the head coach of St. Raymond's High School in the Bronx. He ran a phenomenal program. He's still one of my big-time mentors today. He's the one that really introduced me to how to do this the right way. Did a phenomenal job with the kids on and off the court. I was lucky enough to be a part of a program that at the time was ranked in the top 5 in the country. We got a chance to travel around the country, and we went to Alaska and San Francisco, Fort Worth, Chicago, DC, all over to play basketball. So I really got I really got a strong introduction to it through Gary, through St. Raymond's, and unfortunately, the picture on the screen, I shouldn't have posted that, is me working at 5-Star. Mr. Garfinkel and Will Klein at 5-Star gave me an opportunity to go out and work those camps for years. I think I was out there for 7 or 8 years in a row working, 6, 7, 8 weeks of summer. It was just absolutely a coaching laboratory, coaching clinic every day. Got a chance to work that. Was lucky enough to catch on at UNC Greensboro as an assistant coach for a few years. Worked at the University of Evansville for a year. Was the head coach down in the Hampton Roads area in Hampton, Virginia at Phoebus High School for 5 years before we came up here. My wife is a military brat. Her dad's last station was in Hampton. So we settled there when we first got married. Gannon Baker is a really close friend of mine. He's originally from Hampton, so he hooked me up with his dad, who was a local high school principal, and was able to work there for 5 years. And then we've been up in this area for 15 years. Was lucky enough to work at Wooten High School for 9 years, and this is going into my 6th year at Paint Branch.
All right, Coach Bohlen, appreciate you sharing your background. I'm pretty sure a lot of guys are learning a lot about you, about your whole coaching journey. So I appreciate you sharing that. I'm gonna pass the next question to Coach Will Maynard from Southern.
Coach Bohlen, how you doing, man?
What's going on, Coach? How you doing?
Good to see you. Good to talk to you other than social media or at Josh Pratt's coaching socials. It's always good.
Yeah, most definitely. We hopefully that thing will go off this summer.
I know. If not, man, we're going to have to do it in the fall or whatever. We got to do that. So it's definitely a good time. Definitely. My question to you is, because I've been in this tough situation myself, and obviously I didn't make the move. But I was wondering, how difficult was it for you to leave Wooten to go to Paint Branch, especially being that Paint Branch is a team that's in Montgomery County?
Yep. It was an interesting time at Wooten. I think we were going through a lot of changes in the administration. We were going through a lot of changes in the community. It's the place that I've been the longest in my coaching journey. So it was certainly something tough because we've got a lot of tremendous relationships, my family and I. My daughter grew up in that gym. She's 13 years old. She was first born when I got the job there. She grew up in that gym, and just, we had parents babysitting for her when we were little, when we were playing games. And so it was a tough move, but I just thought it was the right time to get back to a community in Paint Branch that I felt was more along the lines of why I got into coaching. I got into coaching because, nobody ever said no to me when it came to basketball. There were always old heads in the community that were always looking out for us, somebody to keep the gym door open, for kids that were really passionate about basketball. And to take over from Walter Hardy, God rest his soul, to take over for him was a real honor. To take over Paint Branch was just just an opportunity that I couldn't pass up. And it's been a tremendous fit in the classroom, in the community, on the court. We've made a lot of progress in a lot of different areas, and I'm really, really proud of our program and the success the kids have had off the court, as well as some of the W's on the court. But it was a hard decision, but I just felt the timing was right.
So have you played them since you left?
We did, yeah. Actually, my first win at Paint Branch was against Wooten. So it was kind of weird how the good Lord works in mysterious ways. But it was interesting. It was interesting. It was definitely mixed feelings. I got to admit, because you spend a lot of time, and I've known a lot of those kids at Wooten since when they were real little, coming through my camps, but at the same time, you want to get that W. So it was interesting.
Yeah, this was very interesting. It's just crazy how time flies too, man. It seems like just yesterday you was at Wooten, and now you've been at Paint Branch for.
Yeah, it's as I think as we get older, when they say you're on the downhill slope, it certainly feels like time is speeding up. You got all these things you want to accomplish, and it just feels like yesterday that I started at St. Raymond's, and Gary DeCesar and I are still really close friends, and I talked to him yesterday, and he's been using this time to post a lot of old school pictures of us at St. Ray's, and it's just amazing. It's been almost 28 years now since I coached there, and that's just crazy to think about.
Well, your hair's not as gray as you would think for coaching for 28 years.
Yeah. I got to keep it short to keep the gray away. If I turn sideways, I'm in trouble.
I appreciate that, Coach, and
yes,
I'm gonna pass it along to the next coach.
That's better. There you go.
Coach Bohlen, what's going on, man?
Coach Wade, what's happening?
Hey, nothing. Fun fact first, we always talk about it, Coach John and Coach Des Smalls, we always talk about how they were the first people that kind of talked to me when I first came to the county, and I want to go on record and saying, you're the first person that talked to me in Montgomery County, which was kind of where I was like, dang, man, I mean, I kind of like him, although he's a rival school.
That's That's one of the things, what's funny is I think people talk about all the time, how hard it is for them to coach against their friends. I don't know about you, but when I was coming up, the people that I loved competing against were my friends. Because then you could, you know what they do, how hard they work to make their game better. And it's an honor to compete against those kinds of people. And, when I compete against you guys, I know how much O puts into the program. I know how much Chuck puts into his program. I know how much you're putting into your program. And that level of respect, I think, draws the best out of me. It's hard for me to coach against guys that I think half-ass it, that don't really put in 100%, because that doesn't necessarily bring the best out of me. And I get pissed off when their teams beat me. But to coach against guys like you, I think that's really what it's all about, being able to respect your opponents because they're bringing the best out of you. So, I love being at a rival school. I love the atmosphere. The gym's packed and everybody's hooting and hollering and talking trash. And but at the end of the day, we can all just shake it out and go grab a pizza or, adult beverage or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
That's what it's really all about.
Yeah, man. So I definitely wanted to go on record saying I appreciate you for reaching out. You're the first guy to reach out. But question for me right now is looking at the Washington Post, Montgomery County had 8 out of the top 20 scores in the DMV. What would you say about the skill level or just our league in general?
Yeah, I think it's funny. I had a conversation with a college coach. This was probably 4 or 5 years ago, but it just stuck in my head. He was a Division III college coach. At the time, he was at Muhlenberg up in PA. And he said the DMV is one of the most over-recruited areas in the country, for very good reason. College coaches at all levels are coming through the DMV and they're looking for talent, and justifiably so. There's a ton of basketball talent around here. It's a very basketball smart community, and we're producing a lot of kids that can really play at a lot of different levels and really contribute to winning at a lot of different levels. But he said Montgomery County is one of the most under-recruited areas. And I do think there is a stigma about what Montgomery County basketball looks like. And it's unfortunate because I think those kinds of attitudes, I would hope that we're beyond having these kinds of attitudes about certain areas. PG County's this way, Montgomery County's this way, Charles County's this way, Baltimore County, Baltimore City's this way. Rather than having these preset notions of what basketball looks like in Montgomery County, come watch a game. One of my boys from DC came up and watched our game against Blair in the playoff game. It was a phenomenal atmosphere. The gym was packed at Blair, so it's a couple thousand people. We're playing a really high level of basketball. The kids are playing at a high rate of speed. They're making great basketball decisions. They're executing at a really high rate. Their basketball IQs are really high, and their skill level is strong. And he was shocked. He goes, "I can't believe this is Montgomery County basketball." I'm like, "Well, what did you think it looks like?" I think that's one of the problems I think with having so much good basketball in the area is on any given night you can go see the WCAC, the IAC, PG County Public Schools. You can go up to Baltimore and watch the Baltimore Catholic League, and those leagues get their reputation for a reason, and it's justifiable. But come and watch a game. Come and watch us play Blake. Come and watch us play Springbrook. Come and watch us play Gaithersburg with their talent. And I think you'll be surprised at what you see.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Coming over and I guess actually being in it, you like, man, this kid can really play. So I definitely agree with you on that. Come check a game out. That's big. Appreciate your insight on it.
That's one of the things. At the end of the day, if we win 0 games, but all 5 of my seniors go on to play in college, then I've done my job. My job is to make sure that these kids are prepared for life. And if we happen to win some basketball games along the way, that's great. And everybody's going to have a great time and everybody's going to appreciate the experience. But at the end of the day, I want to make sure that these kids are prepared for college, that they can contribute on the court, that they can be successful off the court. And these college coaches need to wake up and realize too, hey, you've got to come check these guys out because, we've got a lot of Division I, Division II, Division III, JUCO, NAIA talent running around. And I think because of that perception, we don't get as much college coaches coming through our gym, whereas O and Chuck and those guys might see something different.
Man, appreciate you. I'll get back to you a little later. We're gonna. It's funny because we're gonna send the next question to Chuck.
What's up, Coach?
What's going on, Chuck? How you doing?
I'm good, man. I'll be the first to tell you I never see college coaches in my gym. No, I'm not gonna say never, but it's very rare. And in fact, it's kind of weird to me because really the coaches that come to PG County public schools are going to specific schools.
Mm-hmm.
They'll go to Wise, they'll go to Roosevelt, and then if there are players that they've heard about at certain schools, they'll go see them. I typically don't see college coaches come to my gym unless it's a junior college coach.
Right. That's the other thing too that fascinates me is as being a former. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but
no, you good.
As being a former college coach myself, when we would go out recruiting, the first thing we did was made sure that everybody in our local area knew who we were.
Mm-hmm.
So we went and visited high school gyms, regardless of whether or not you had a player or not, because one of these days you might have a player, and we want to build relationships. I think a lot of college coaches, to be honest with you, I'm going to get in trouble for this, but I think a lot of college assistant coaches are lazy. They think working hard is going out and sitting in a gym at Spooky Nook all day. That's not working hard. Working hard is having to drive to the IS8 playoffs in Jamaica, Queens on one night, and then drive out to 5-Star in Pittsburgh another night, and then drive down to South Carolina another night to see another kid. And that's the kind of work that we used to do when we were working in college. When I was at Evansville, we just take days and start driving around to local high schools just to say hi. How can we help? What kinds of things, what kind of questions do you have of us? And it's unfortunate, I think, because we do have so many great colleges, and I know the recruiting calendars are different and all that kind of stuff, but we do have so many great colleges in this area, Division 1, 2, 3, JUCOs, that we don't have more guys coming through our gym in a fall workout situation just to say hi, just to check guys out. We got too many guys that are relying so much on the AAU scene to do most of their evaluations that they forget about all the positive things that are going on in high schools all over this area.
Absolutely. No,
absolutely. Don't steal the secrets. Don't put the secrets out, Bohlen. That's my lane.
Yeah, that's the reason why WAU getting so many kids. They in the gym all the time.
Yeah, it's all about building relationships, and kids know when you're full of crap.
Absolutely.
Kids know when you're a college coach and you just come rolling in because, oh, wait a minute, somebody offered you, so now I got to get on board. They know that you're, for the most part, they'll know that you're full of crap.
Absolutely. I'll tell you this, I've seen Washington Venice at more games than any other school combined. I'm talking about if you take all the schools that have actually been to my gym total, I've seen Washington Venice that much more than all of them.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, so. All right, so my question, it's funny you said that comment about coaches being in the gym. Now we're talking about rules. So my question to you is, what rule would you change? And I'm going to give you kind of a three-pronged approach to it.
All right.
What would you change from the NFHS level? What rule would you change or implement from the Maryland state level? What rule would you change or implement from the county level?
Oh, my God. How long do we have for this?
You got 5 minutes for this question.
Can I just say everything? Is that one of the things that really just as a blanket? So this is sort of my approach when it comes to these rules. My approach to basketball is that basketball is my 6th class of the day. I'm a social studies teacher. I teach 5 classes of government, and basketball is my 6th class of the day. I'm a teacher. If somebody came up to me and said, Coach, can you help me write my essay? Of course, I would say yes. Nobody in the administration, nobody from the state, nobody from the NFHS would come down and say, no, you can't help that kid with their essay. When kids come to me and say, Coach, can you help me with my jump shot? It's not because of any other reason than I want to help them get better at the game that I love and the game that they want to invest in. So I shouldn't be restricted from giving them that extra tutoring, from giving them that extra help, the same way I shouldn't be restricted when I give it to them in the classroom. And if we look at it from a really purely educational standpoint, if that kid doesn't come to one of us, who is he going to? Because he's going to find somebody that's going to say, yes, you can come work on your jump shot.
Yeah.
So first and foremost, maybe the guy is qualified, maybe he's not. Secondly, and more importantly, and this is where I really have got a major problem with all these governing bodies, they're going to have to go out and find somebody to pay to help with their jump shot. I'll give it to you for free. You don't have to pay $50 an hour to go to some skills trainer, whatever the heck that means these days. Okay? And at the end of the day, if you've got kids in your building, which I know all of us do, that can't afford $50, but they're begging and pleading and saying, Mom, please, I got to go work with this trainer. I got to go work with this trainer. Mom is going to find a way to use that $50 to get her son to that trainer. Now, how can we look at those families in the eye and say, you know, we're doing the best we can for your kid? Because we're not. What we should be doing is allowing all of us as expert teachers, as expert coaches, access to our kids year round. Now, does that mean that I'm going to have them in the gym 2 hours, 6 days a week? No, of course not, because I understand that it takes balance. It takes his AAU coach. It takes his high school coach. It takes the strength coach. It takes the baseball coach. It takes the football coach, you know, whatever. They're playing multiple sports. So there's lots of different things that go into it. But at the end of the day, I think if we really look at this as an educational, a part of their education, then you need to provide them access, them being the kids, them access to the best possible coaching at the least expensive price. And we can level the playing field. You know, it's fascinating. When I went to DeMatha, the DeMatha Summer League, I'm always watching these private school teams, and I'm looking at the level of athleticism. And the big difference, of course, is that a lot of the private school teams will have bigs. They'll have 6'8", 6'9", 6'10", whatever it might be. But the level of athleticism at the end of the day is very similar. And I know a lot of people will be surprised that I say that, but the level of athleticism is very similar. Where I think you really see the disparity between private and public is that the skill level of a lot of these private school kids is dramatically higher. Why is that? Because they can go work with Mike Jones whenever they want. And Mike can open up the gym, and he can set up the gun, and he can give them coaching, and his staff can give them coaching. And if we were allowed to do that, it would take the pressure off, because we could do the same level of development. It would take the pressure off of having to go to a private school, having to find money for tuition. So at the end of the day, what I really want to champion are all those kids that we all grew up with that slipped through the cracks. Because now we've got more and more and more kids slipping through the cracks because they don't have access to a private school education, or they don't have access to private skills trainers, or they don't have access to private strength and conditioning coach trainers. And the value that we bring is being minimized because we don't have access to these kids.
No question.
You know, and I really feel very, very strongly this is a matter of equity and opportunity. You know, a kid should not be limited in his basketball growth, just the same way he shouldn't be limited in his economic growth, or his educational growth, just because of his economic background, or those kinds of obstacles that do not need to be there. We're at a time period right now where there's so many good coaches, there's so many good programs. You know, I'd let my son play for any one of you guys, except for maybe Coach Wade. I don't know yet. I don't know if I can see my son and Blake. We'll talk about that later. But seriously, I think we're at a point now where we've got so many quality people in this profession that could do so many good things for these kids, and it's just being limited by very short-sighted governing bodies that don't understand, you know, the real effect that these decisions are having on the street. You know, I want the director of the MPSSAA to come down to Paint Branch or Blake or Fairmont Heights or wherever it might be, and I want him to look my kids in the eye and say, you know what, there are 150 college coaches down the street at DeMatha this weekend, but you can't go.
Yeah.
Can he do that? No, he can't, because he doesn't have enough courage to come down and look the kid in the eye that his decision is affecting, because all he's doing is worrying about covering his ass and insurance and all these other kinds of ridiculous things, when at the end of the day, all we want to do is provide our kids with a platform to be successful.
Absolutely. It's great that you brought up
about this all day, because this just gets me heated.
Absolutely.
Because, at the end of the day, I don't think anybody's in the teaching profession or the coaching profession, to get rich. We're all in it because somebody gave back to us, and we want to pay it forward. At least the guys that are in it for the right reasons, the guys that are really going to invest in their communities, like you guys. I think the more we limit those kinds of opportunities for reasons that don't have to do with the best interests of the kids, I think it's criminal, to be honest with you.
No, I agree with you. It's amazing because you've been one of those guys who really championed the ideal of equity. So that's why I thought it'd be a really great question for you. No, Coach, I appreciate it, man, shedding some light on that. And hopefully, in the near future, we can see some of those things so that, your son could, grow up in a situation where he doesn't have to deal with these issues or have to use private school as an outlet, because
right.
I'd love to see him play for you.
Yeah, he's still not playing a blink.
All right, so I'm going to pass it over to Coach John at Parkdale High School.
What's going on, Coach? How you doing?
What's going on, Coach? How's life?
It's good. It's good. Glad to have you. Greatly appreciate it.
No problem, man.
So my question to you, I think you touched on it a little bit. So, we talked about, kids, having equity and providing a platform for them. When I first began coaching, Coach Des and Coach O always talk about Coach Bohlen's camps and your booster club and your fundraising. So can you start off with just telling us about your ideas of like camps in the future? How has camps been successful for you in the past? Can you elaborate more on why it's needed within the county? And then can you talk about your booster clubs and fundraising just to help a program, push forward?
You want the legal above board stuff, or you want the like under the table stuff? There'll be all the slush fund stuff.
Legal. Keep it legal.
What's interesting is I think I've always been a child of camps. I came up, going to 5-star when I was a player, going to my local high school coaches camps when I was in middle school or junior high back then, kind of looking up to all the high school guys that I wanted to be like. And as I got into coaching, and Gary DeCesar was really big on this at St. Raymond's, we were a nationally ranked program, but we were a locally built program. It was a Catholic school that did recruit, and we got kids eventually from different parts of the city, but we got kids from right around the neighborhood in the Bronx. And it was all because of the camps and things like that, and opening up the games to, CYO programs and rec league programs. And, he really wanted St. Raymond's to represent the community. And that's one of the things I've always carried with me, is that this word community, it gets kicked around a lot. Family gets kicked around a lot, but what does it really mean? And how do we put that into action? And the easiest way for us, because we're all basketball junkies, I think we'd all stay in the gym all day if we could, is to run summer camps. And I think it's, number one, I think it exposes kids to the high school atmosphere, to the high school players. It increases your level of interest in the community, so that people will come, watch you at rivalry games. They'll come travel and check you out at other gyms. But most importantly, I think too, is that, in this, and I just keep going back to this, nobody ever told me no when I was a kid. There were always people around that were willing to open up the gym or give us tips or, help us out with camp. My high school coaches camp was maybe like $100. It was $125 or whatever for the week. There were never any obstacles that were put in our way as far as wanting to get better or wanting to invest in the game or wanting to just be a part of, something fun. And the more and more I look around, you look at some of these camps, they're $200, $300, $400 a week. It's like, how in the world can anybody afford to send their kids to camp? I mean, we make a pretty decent living here in Montgomery County, and I can't afford to send my kids, to more than a week or so of camp. And I just think we're making it less and less accessible for the kids that need it most. So what I wanted to try and do was trying to develop camps that, number one, were going to be inexpensive, but number two, we're also going to provide a really high level of instruction. And this goes back to my 5-star days. You know, get 6 adults to run the stations. Don't just get your players to run the stations. Get guys that want to come in and volunteer their time and give back to the community to run the stations, to coach the teams, so that the kids are getting a really high level of instruction. And also in an environment where it really is a lot of fun. You know, I don't want the game to be work for kids in 4th and 5th and 6th grade. It'll be work soon enough if they really want to invest in it. But at the end of the day, you know, what I want our camps to try and do is try and give kids that love. You know, I mean, I think everybody on this screen right now can remember the first time they fell in love with basketball. You know, I can remember the first time I shot a basketball in my neighbor's garage. And that image sticks with me when I try and run camps. You know, I want kids that are going to come away with a love of the game, with a love of how we approach the game, with a love of working at the game, but also just love of playing and relationships and you know, making friends, learning a few life lessons. And I think all that, you know, once again, I think the community knows when you're full of crap, when you're being self-serving, and when you're just trying to make a buck. You know, in return, I think the community gets to see who we really are and what we're really about, and all those different kinds of things. It's been tremendously fun for me, to be honest with you. you know, and at the end of the day, you know, sometimes I'm a bit selfish with these things. Sometimes I just do stuff just because I want to have some fun with basketball. And all that money then goes back to the program. So our fundraiser, our booster club, if you want to call it that, really has been about using our camp money to help fund the kids' summer leagues and team camps and things like that, so we can take the cost off of those families. So really, it's just been a kind of a self-perpetuating thing. You know, it was good last year, so we'll do it again this year. And I just like having kids in the gym. You know, we got a beautiful facility at Paint Branch. And seeing, you know, kids having a blast in our facility is just a lot of fun. So that's kind of the reasons we do it. And then we can use it to help, you know, take the kids at DeMatha Summer League or Maryland Team Camp or whatever it might be.
Definitely. I definitely appreciate that. I had one more follow-up question. So you spoke briefly about the MPSSA not being able to come and tell a kid that it's going to be 500 coaches at DeMatha. Mm-hmm. What ideas do you have, you know, for Montgomery County? I know PG County has came together. We're trying to figure out a way, if it does happen, to get our kids showcased during that live period. Mm-hmm. What's an idea that you can pitch out that can help our county kids throughout those times?
Yeah, this is actually something I started kicking around a couple of years ago, but it's something that came to, you know, a little bit more urgent. It came with a little bit more urgency considering the time period and the recruiting periods and the way the NCAA has changed some things up. But we started a Montgomery County Coaches Association. Des is going to be a big part of that. Coach Wade is going to be a big part of that. And, you know, a lot of the other younger coaches in the county really, it's something that they really wanted to be involved in. And I've actually talked to Chuck too about partnering with PG and trying to develop some exposure events during those live periods. And one of the things that I think bothers me the most about the MPSSAA is that they're, you know, it's like trying to turn the Titanic. You know, it's such a huge organization that has so many different things going on that when the NCAA decides to change recruiting periods, they're not efficient enough to address that. So maybe smaller, locally run organizations like our coaches associations, you know, working together could put on something, you know, and could be something that we could do together to really, you know, help our kids. But those are the kinds of things, you know, I think the Coaches Association, we could do a fall showcase. I propose a fall showcase, getting a monthly newsletter together to send out to colleges, highlighting our different programs and different kids. You know, doing those kinds of things, I think the more exposure we get, the better. You know, at the end of the day, it's all about information and how do we get that information out there in an efficient way that college coaches won't just toss it in the garbage.
Definitely. So, you know, whenever you.
Yeah, when I was a college coach.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm definitely willing to work alongside, already working with Coach Chuck willing to work with you, Coach Wade.
Yeah.
So when that time
I mean,
comes, I'm
I
definitely
love that idea you guys did last year with the media day. You know, I think we're definitely stealing that here in Montgomery County, because that was just a great way to kick off the season. Especially, you know, now we're looking at a time period where there isn't going to be no recruiting period. You know, so how do we fill that hole for kids that are in the 2021 class? You know, how do we work on kids that are in the 2020 class and get the word out for them? You know, we've been trying to repost a lot of things on social media as far as kids highlights and stuff like that, but you know, it's a crazy time period, and the more we can work together, and this goes back to, you know, respecting people that you work with, and having good relationships with the other coaches in your area, is, you know, the more we can work together to get the word out, you know, I think the better off it'll be for all the kids.
Definitely. So, I mean, I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Coach O. He's going to elaborate basically what you're just saying right now. So,
all right,
give Coach O the floor.
All right. So, yeah, you're absolutely right, John. I'm sitting here every time the question's being asked, it's like we're getting closer and closer to what I'm already about to ask you. You said it earlier.
You know what's funny? It's funny you said that, because one of the things I've sort of discovered, you know, when I first started coaching, it was all about the X's and O's and look at how smart I am, because I can run all these different sets with these kids and all that kind of stuff. And then as I've gotten older, you know, you realize that if you start to pull on one thing, it's kind of like one big ball of string, you know, running your program. You know, people, they get jobs, will ask me, you know, where should I start when I'm building my program? And I always say, hey, start anywhere. Right. You know, because if you start pulling on one thread, you start talking about recruiting, you know, then you can start talking about skill development and videos and working with each other, and all, you know, everything's so closely tied together that if you just pull on one string and you keep pulling, you know, you're going to touch on everything.
Absolutely. And like what you said earlier, I mean,
Coach, man, I gotta tell you this too, by the way. I see you sporting that quarantine hairline, man. Come on.
Yeah, I ain't doing nothing. Chuck cheating. Chuck got his hair cut. He said he's gonna get one. But he got his hair cut. I didn't get mine cut.
I love it.
So one of the things that you said earlier too, when you was talking about Coach Wade and Wade being over at Blake and being his competitor, he said you was the first coach on that side that actually said something to him or talked to him about it. One of the things I know and I got from you years ago, when dads would come to me like, man, it's this guy, man, it's Coach Bohlen. Man, I'm trying to tell you, man, Coach, you gotta meet him. I'm like, all right, let's go meet him. Are you ready? I'm like, hey, right now? He's like, yeah, let's go meet him. And when I met you, it was genuine, you know, and like I told Coach Chuck, when he first got the job at Fairmont Heights, I knew of Chuck, you know, but I immediately sent him an email as if I knew him and asked him, is there anything that you need? We're in the same area.
Yeah. Need
anything, just let me know, whatever. And one of the things that my question I want to ask you, so we get out there to the masses and to the coaches and let them know the need for it. You have competitor, and then you had the compassion.
Yeah.
And where do you, I don't want to say draw the line, but how do you match those two up and making sure that they're somewhat equal to being that need for coaches to be able to help out and reach out to coaches, whether it be after game or at a coaching clinic, and it be somebody that's in your same conference that you helping them out. How do you figure that part out, and how do you go about getting there?
Right. I think that's an interesting question. I never really thought about how to divide it. It's kind of like, you know, I talk to my players all the time about, like, look, you know, we're going to spend 2 hours between these lines, and for the next 2 hours, you know, I want you pushing your teammates as hard as you possibly can. You know, I want you out there trying to take his job. You know, if he's a starter and you're not, and you want to start, go out there and take his job. Okay? But when we come back across those lines and go back into the locker room, you know, we're still brothers and we're still family and we're still a team. And I think the same thing holds true in the coaching community. You know, I think, you know, because I respect somebody's job, you know, it doesn't mean that, you know, when you and I get together, it doesn't mean that I don't, you know, want to take you out behind the woodshed. Yeah. You know, it's like, I still want to, you know, we still want to get after it. We still want to play our best basketball. We still want to compete. But one of the things that I've really, and this is just sort of me, I respect the hell out of guys that will invest in their programs and invest in their kids and that are real, that aren't just throwing words around. Everybody's got something on the back of their T-shirt, family, unfinished business, whatever it might be. But guys that are real about those kinds of things, really earn my respect, because I know how much work goes into making something like a slogan real. How much work goes into making that word family real when you're in a basketball program. Those are the kinds of people that I want to compete against, because those are the kind of people that draw the best out of me. If I know that you're cutting corners and you're illegally recruiting, or you're having illegal practices, or you've got kids from all over the place that have been falsifying addresses, if I know you're cutting corners and you have no integrity, I don't have any respect for you. And that just, it makes me angry that there have been people like that in this profession for generations, and there will continue to be people like that in this profession. But those aren't the kind of people that I want to compete against. And I do think we have a responsibility as coaches to pass on the kind of game that we want our kids playing. I want my kids playing for guys like you, and I want to be a part of, other coaches' growth process the way that other people poured into me when I was a young coach, because I want to see our game move forward in a really healthy way. I love competing against my friends, because it means, that you guys draw the best out of me, and that's just sort of the way I've always looked at it. I'm not one of those I gotta have a chip on my shoulder kind of guy, or I got disrespected by this guy or that guy. But those kinds of things don't really motivate me. And I want our players to emulate that. I want our players, to go out there and just kill it every night, and then shake hands and go out in the parking lot and get a ride home from the Hetheringtons or whoever. I want that kind of community bond to be there. And I understand rivalries, and I understand things get heated, but I also understand that I think it's important to, be able to teach our kids to compete with compassion and with empathy, and be able to, hang it up once we get back across those lines and go back out into our communities. Because at the end of the day, we're all from the same community. If Desmond has, if Coach Wade has success at Blake, that brings success to me at Paint Branch, because it raises the profile of Montgomery County. If Coach Chuck has success at Fairmont Heights, then it raises the level of Bladensburg, because it brings success to PG County. And that we can use to help kids. And that's really what this is all about.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that, because what you just said too, because like when I talk to a lot of college coaches and newspapers or people that's doing some media for Prince George's County and just wanting to talk about Bladensburg, I feel as though that when you're coaching, you got to spend a little bit more time talking about other kids in your county as well, because that's what brings more attention to your county. Mm-hmm. Just don't focus on just your kids and your program. So I definitely appreciate that. And like I said, I want to say thank you to you as well, because you helped us out tremendously. And kids already know every year we going to scrimmage Paint Branch, or we even going to play Paint Branch. It's like a trend. They already know what's going to happen, because, iron sharpens iron.
Yeah,
Definitely. So I'm going to pass you on to Coach Chuck.
All right, Coach. So got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
I know we've talked a lot about rules. We talked a lot about culture. We talked about a lot of these different things. MPSSAA.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say hypothetically, and obviously with the climate of where we are right now, with this coronavirus, may not be in the AAU.
Right.
Let's say, and I kind of want to throw out a hypothetical scenario for you. Let's say hypothetically things start to open up, and let's say it's June, it's late June, and they say, all right, everyone can come back out and let's get back to normal. Where would you suggest, or like say if you were the director of the MPSSAA, what would you allow us to do? What changes would you implement based on, this coronavirus, and, in order for the kids to be prepared for the fall? What events would you do? Tell me what you think the ideal scenario is when we go back to school. Let's say in August, September.
Right. I think, the ideal scenario would be that somebody recognizes, hopefully somebody in a decision-making role, recognizes that this is a unique situation. And even if the rules say X, we need to do Y in order to help the kids that missed out on these months. I mean, April through July is such a huge recruiting period in men's basketball. Maybe girls basketball too. I'm not quite sure what they're.
No, in girls basketball, AAU coaches can still go to practices, so it's not such a big thing with the women.
Right. And that's where I think the problem with the MPSSAA right now is that when they make a decision, they look at it as not just boys basketball. They say, well, wait a minute, if we change it for boys basketball, now we got to change it for football and lacrosse and all these other kinds of sports. In reality, boys basketball, I think, is facing a very unique situation with the way the recruiting calendar is set up. And I would hope that our state association recognizes that and says, okay, we want to prepare our kids as best we possibly can to move on to the next level as students, as athletes, as people. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to open up the fall period for high school coaches to work with their players. They can put a restriction on it if they want. You can only have 2 hours of practice every day, or you can only, have 2 hours of practice a week, or you can only have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays to practice, or whatever kind of restriction they want to put on that. And then find some way, and I don't know if it's going to be an NCAA decision, but find some way to have team camps so that high schools can get out and compete in environments where NCAA college coaches can come and evaluate our kids. There's got to be some way to do that to make up for this hole that's been created by this coronavirus. The kids haven't done anything wrong. We haven't done anything wrong. It's just a very unique situation. And I think if the NCAA does open up the fall for evaluations, then the MPSSAA has to be nimble enough and understanding enough and empathetic enough, as they say they are, to allow us access to work with our kids to make sure that we can get them out there in a situation where they can be truly evaluated, and then hopefully, get some opportunities from that. You and I have talked before, unfortunately, they don't seem to be as student-centered an organization as we would like. So, hopefully they're going to take this all into account, but, I'm certainly not going to hold my breath for it.
Okay. Have you seen the legislation that needs to be signed by Governor Hogan regarding the additional games?
Yes. That's like you said, it's an interesting starting point. And I know that the representative from Baltimore City presented that. Actually, after we talked a couple of days ago, I actually went and looked up that legislation. That's an interesting. That's certainly an interesting starting point. Like you said, we both, I think, would like to see that expanded. But there does need to be a recognition that, athletics in general, basketball in particular, to give these kids this opportunity, I think has become a major part of our job. And I think the more we can provide kids opportunities to get in front of college coaches, the more opportunities they're going to have.
Okay. So you can see on your screen right there, Coach O has the legislation up.
Yeah.
I think the one thing that really troubles me about it is the fact that it says that we can do four additional games.
Mm-hmm.
4 additional tournament games, but it doesn't specify whether they specifically have to be used in the summer or if they can be, like the way it's written, you can actually use them in your season or you can use them in the summer.
Right.
So, yeah. I mean, me, going into this season where I only have, I have 0 seniors, I can get up to 26 games in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think that's where I think it's pretty poorly written. I don't think it goes nearly far enough to recognize the year-round nature of the recruiting calendar. of recognizing the need to get your kids into practices and get your kids into skill development. And I just keep going back to that thing we talked about earlier. You know, if I'm a social studies teacher and somebody wants help with an essay, that's a natural part of my job. If I'm a basketball coach and somebody wants help with their jumper, that's a natural part of my job. We should not be farming these responsibilities out to these private guys, to these skill development coaches. And there are a lot of good ones out there. I'm not saying that nothing bad against them, but we need to take more responsibility for the product. You know, our season is not November to February, you know, and there needs to be some recognition of that. You know, like I said earlier, none of us are in this for the money. You don't have to pay us any extra, but you do need to recognize the value that we bring to kids' lives and allow us access to work with these kids on a year-round basis. And you can structure that lots of different ways. I know my boy works over at Herndon High School in Virginia, and they've got like a green day, red day, yellow day kind of system, you know, where green days, they're given a certain amount of green days during the off season where they can have full skill development workouts. They can fully practice if you wanted to.
Wow.
Yellow days is nothing but conditioning and non-basketball specific stuff. And then red days are dead, obviously. They can't do anything. So there's lots of different ways you can structure all this stuff. But the fact that they're not even acknowledging how much we as coaches bring to these kids' lives is something that fundamentally bothers me.
Yeah, and it's ironic that you bring up football because football is allowed to do 7-on-7s in the spring.
Right.
You know, so
Right.
you know, it's kind of ironic that they're willing to make those changes for football, which is the big money sport. However, they haven't recognized and that, you know, trying to build those kids' bodies up to be able to resist injuries and things, but they haven't recognized the fact that basketball needs to do the same thing.
Yeah, and I think, you know, you can recognize that with, here's my thing, it's the public schools, and Montgomery County is a perfect example. Montgomery County, I've worked in some areas where people would give their left arm to have half of the resources that Montgomery County has. I mean, the resources that we have in this area are just staggering. There's nothing, there is no limit to anything we could do except for our own imagination. I mean, we could build such great public school programs, and we could seriously be flagships for the way that public school athletics programs are supposed to be run. And that goes true for anything. If a kid's passionate about football, we can give them the best. If they're passionate about lacrosse, we can give them the best. If they're passionate about basketball, we can give them the best. And the fact that that kind of forward thinking is not endorsed by our administrators and by the state is one of the biggest frustrating things for me as far as, you know, really wanting to be able to serve these kids.
Gotcha. All right, Coach. So I'm going to pass it on over to Coach Wade. He's got an additional question for you.
All right, Coach. So you have hell of players that come through your program every year. They leave, they come, they leave. But Paint Branch remains relevant every year. Can you explain your strategy on building a program?
Yeah. First and foremost, I think we all have to, and this is kind of based on who you are, I think, as a coach and the kinds of things that you really want at the end of the day, your kids to internalize. But we all have to have our non-negotiables. You know, what are the pillars that you're building your program on? So it doesn't matter from year one to year now going into year 6. You know, the pillars of our program are the same. And that's when you see my little hashtag One Heart, you know, hard work, commitment to excellence, positive attitude, respect, and teamwork, you know, are our 5 core values. And it doesn't matter if you go back to my days at Wooten, go back to my days coaching in New York City, or you know, when I was forming these kinds of things, when I was coaching in college, those are the 5 core values that I've always sort of been really, really selfish about. I'm not going to sacrifice those 5 things just simply to win a basketball game. And I think the kids know that, and I don't want to say they buy into it because I'm not selling it to them. It's just sort of, you know, it's just sort of the way things are. But when the kids see you living those 5 things, that really forms the foundation of your program. And it's never perfect. And this is one of the things I love talking to young coaches about. You know, building programs and maintaining a level of excellence whether it's on the scoreboard or whether it's just in the way you play or the number of kids you send off to college. Maintaining a level of excellence is messy. You know, it takes hard decisions. It takes tough conversations. It's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be a straight line from I start my program, I win a state title. You know, it's going to be all sorts of different highs and lows, and how you manage all those things really depends, I think, on how much you buy into, you believe in your core values, who you are as a person and who you are and what you value as a coach. I think is really strong, really important. Next, I think because we work in public schools, you know, I think your system, which does have, everything has to reflect your core values. So your system should be a reflection of what you think basketball looks like. So when I start coaching every year, I sit down and I say, okay, with this team that we've got coming up here, what does a perfect possession look like on both ends of the court? A couple of years ago, it would look like full court pressing, 1-3-1, you know, really getting after it. This past year, you know, our man-to-man our half-court man ended up being our best defense. So it changes from year to year, but I think you have to be, as a public high school coach, flexible, have a system that is consistent enough so you're not trying to reinvent the wheel every year, but it's flexible enough to address the different kinds of talent that you have coming through. So one year you might have a great big, you know, most years, especially in Montgomery County, we're going to have a lot of great guards. So how do we develop a system that's flexible enough to address your best player? You know, so a few years ago, our best player was, you know, Xavier Reeves, you know, 6'4", 6'5", long, athletic wing, you know, Bobby Miller, you know, those kinds of kids, long, athletic, could really get out and finish on the break. You know, last year, you know, Juan Bell was our best player. The year before that, Richard Dudley, two little smaller point guards. You know, how do we accentuate those talents, you know, to get the best out of our team every year? You know, and, you know, without simplifying it too much, at the end of the day, it really comes down to how you communicate. You know, are you consistently communicating with everybody that's in your program? So, you know, does the 15th man on the JV have the same kind of relationship with you that your best, quote unquote, best player does? Does he know that the door is always open? Does he know that you're always there to help him with his academics or with his character development or with problems he might have in the community? You know, are you consistently communicating all those things? And once again, you know, those are ideals. You know, does it always happen that way? No. You know, I didn't think I did a very good job this past season of making sure that all of our relationships were as strong as they've been in the past. So as a result, we got a very inconsistent result on the court. You know, but that's why times like this are actually great. You can look back and self-reflect and say, hey, you know, what kinds of things could I have done better as a coach to make this past season better on the court, off the court, in the classroom? And then how do I build on that and develop next year? I think probably one of the biggest things I've had to kind of come to grips with is, and maybe all coaches do, but as a young coach, you know, it was all about me and my ego and I belong here, you know, trying to prove to everybody that I could coach, you know, and now it's much more about what the kids are getting out of it. So I don't need to prove to people that I know my X's and O's and know my system. I just have to make sure that I'm doing the best for the kids. And that's been a big shift in the way I've sort of approached building the program. But like I said earlier, it's kind of like pulling on a string. You know, you start to take a look at one thing and all sorts of other things start to unravel. And that's kind of the fun part for me as a coach. It's like there's always something more you can learn. There's always a better way to communicate. There's always a better way to run a ball screen. And if you're constantly curious about those things, then your program will continue to grow and will continue to develop regardless of what it says on the scoreboard.
Man, you bring up some good points. I think the best thing out of that was the core values. Me and my staff we don't argue, but anytime I'm kind of moving away from a core value that they feel I'm moving away, they'll be like, nah, you can't do it. Yeah. And we'll get to battling back and forth, but there's no middle ground. Kind of having those guys around to hold you to your standard and what your core values is pretty huge.
And that's a great point too about the staff too. Is it's so hard. I know for me it's been difficult to build a staff, not necessarily because we don't have great guys that want to work with the program, but just because being a public school, there's not a lot of guys in the school that want to help out anymore, which is another problem we could talk about for days. We don't have a lot of coaches in the building. And the guys that we do have, they're outside of the building that are phenomenal people. Their schedules are dependent on their own jobs. So how do you bring in a staff that's going to be consistently there at practice, to keep your feet to the fire? And I love arguing with my staff. I tell all the time, hey, you guys are suggestion makers. You guys keep throwing stuff out, and I'll keep saying yes or no and so on and so forth, as long as we know that we're on the same page when we move out in front of the kids. That's what great staffs do. And those are the kinds of things I think that I've gotten more in tune with as I've gotten older, is that, I don't have to have the right answers for everything. I should know if I'm having problems, I can call up Coach O and say, hey, Coach, how do you handle this? And that's a part of the growth process that I think I've really embraced over the last probably 7 to 8 years.
Yeah, definitely. So last question, kind of a hot seat question, but we consider you a vet. So what's a great example of a program that you've seen been built over the years?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. There are so many of them. I can think of. I'm trying to think of high school programs in the area that I really respect the hell out of. And there's a lot of those, but I think that's a great question. I don't know. I'd have to think about that one. I think
Coach, you got to throw one out. Just give us one.
The easiest ones to look at are the ones that have had their coaches there for years. So, you think of Dan Harwood and Magruder. I loved watching Lou Wilson's teams play when he was over at Riverdale. I haven't had a chance to see him play when he was at Wise. But guys that have really invested in those communities, I've not been lucky enough to find a place where I thought I could be at for 30, 40 years. But to see guys that are investing in that, I keep going back to my first experience at St. Raymond's High School in the Bronx. The school has grown since I was there. But Gary DeCesar got that job at 21 years old. He was a graduate of the school. The school was in literally an old Con Edison electric power plant. The stairwells were just tiny. You could barely move. The gym was a little old New York City bandbox. And he turned that thing into a national powerhouse that still continues to this day to turn out major Division I players, even though he's not there anymore. I just think of that, the amount of work that goes into that, the amount of commitment, the amount of family time that was invested. His wife, Pammy, was really involved in everything there too. And just the overall complete commitment of that family to help those kids in that neighborhood is just still, to me, one of the most inspirational things that I've ever been a part of. And it's still very much the core of what I am as a coach today. And then you can look at programs in the college ranks. I love watching Duke. I know it's like, Duke or Carolina. I'm sorry, O. You going to cut me off now?
Yep.
And it's not necessarily because of the way they play or anything like that, but it goes back to the core values thing. Coach K has developed a lot as a coach, but the core values that he started with back in the early 80s are still there. I find that just absolutely amazing that you can build something to a level like he has at Duke, with core values that go back to when he was a player at Army for Bobby Knight. I just think that's, to hold on to those core values and to really stand by those core values and believe in those core values and believe in your process strongly enough to weather all the storms. Dean Smith was the same way. Give a little shout out there. I think that all those guys that really have invested that much time in a community, I think is something that's, it's inspirational, to be honest with you.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of people don't know, man, you do a lot for Montgomery County. Me coming over and interacting with you, you do a lot, kind of taking over the little small, little intangible things that people have no clue that go on. So big shout out to you, man. We appreciate you. I'm going to send you over to Coach Will.
All right.
Coach, it's good to hear you talk about core values, because it seems like culture and core values is something that we tend to hear about a lot.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But,
Mm-hmm.
you know, my opinion, I'm kind of like different as far as core values. I think core values is just something that we, and I say we as coaches, just use because it sounds good. Now, don't get it twisted. It's some guys, don't get it twisted. It's some guys out here that will get rid of their best player just as fast as they would get rid of their 15th player. But, you know, I've seen and heard of situations where, you know, coaches will preach about core values, but yeah, their core values don't mean nothing when the guy's averaging 20 points a game. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
But my question to you is, what was the toughest loss you've ever had to deal with? Because I know every loss is tough as a coach, because, you know, obviously we're competitors. We want to win every game. But do you have that one game that replays in your mind and you just wish that you could have just replayed the last quarter or half or whatever?
Oh, my God.
And I mean it in Maryland, like since you've been at Wooten or Paint Branch.
Yeah, no doubt. I should have called a timeout earlier in the first half against Blake. little MFers.
Don't believe in first half timeouts, man.
First half timeout against Blake,
Nah,
last game of the season. I couldn't believe it. I was like, we're going to make a layup sooner or later, right? I guess not. No, honestly, there was a point. I actually do have one. We were playing. So we played Perry Hall 2 years in a row in the Final Eight in the regional championship. The first year, what's that?
No, I wasn't saying anything.
Okay, sorry. The first year we were at their place, and 3 different technical fouls were assessed to my team, not me. In a crazy scenario, so I was actually ejected from the game.
Wow. Jeez.
Yeah, so I had to watch the game from the locker room.
Wow, I never knew that.
It was crazy.
Oh, you know what? I heard about. You know what? It's funny now that you say that. I heard about that because in the coaches section up at Xfinity, it was college coaches talking about how that was BS.
Yeah,
I remember.
It was an absolutely crazy scenario. It started with a technical foul because some kid dunked in warmups, which I don't know if he dunked it or not, but that's beside the point. But the next year, Xavier Reeves was a senior, Bobby was a senior, Bobby Miller was a senior, Richard Dudley was a junior, and we were really good. We won 20+ games that year, and the game, we were actually a higher seed that year, and the game was at our place. And we had a phenomenal first half. Richard, I think, scored 20 or something like that in the first half. And we were up 6, maybe 5 or 6 going in at halftime. And they had 3 kids that would eventually become pretty big-time Division I players. One kid went to Cincinnati. One kid went to Illinois. One kid went to Miami. And they were all 6'8". So they outsized us in a lot of different positions. But the kid, Hardnett, LaQuill Hardnett, I think his first name was, went on a personal 11-0 run in the third quarter, and we lost the lead. And I called a timeout with 1.3 seconds left in the third quarter. I just got lost. I didn't realize how much time was on the clock. I was like, and then when I saw the clock, I was like, oh shit. Why did I waste that time? And then the kids thought I was panicking because he had gone on that run, and we never got the lead back, and we ended up losing by 6 or 7 or whatever it was. And I just thought I was like, in that moment, I just got lost, and I was like, I continue to look back at that as a moment that I really dropped the ball, and I wish I could have that one back.
So that was the same year Coach O and those guys played them, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
And I gotta chime in on this
Yep.
just because I mean it was so huge for our community. I mean, we wanted to win. We was beating them all game long, and look, that same player went on a crazy run by himself. I mean, I don't remember the points, but I think he might have scored like 15 straight on us to take the lead and for us to lose the game. So, and we went off a Bohlen scout because Bohlen helped us out a lot. I appreciate you. Put us in a great position. Put us in a great position
and
to
you
win.
got the same result. That's great. Smart.
Yeah, and hey, you know, you can have the greatest scout ever, and I'm pretty sure Owen John can attest to this. And players make plays, man. Like, God, you just made me hurt.
This is the part where your coaches that left the staff, you can blame them. Oh, John, man, if you had just told me that kid number 1 could play, we'd have been.
We had the scout, but we ain't had no answer for that run. No, we didn't.
Man,
honestly, I could say with O, I think our scout was phenomenal. You know, O is a great X and O's guy, man. I've been fortunate to be around O and learn from guys like O and yourself. I think our scout was crazy, man. They just their horse versus our horse. He just made a little bit more plays towards the end, and we end up losing. But no, I'd never trade that experience for nothing in the world.
Yeah, it's terrible that, you know, not just, you know, you, Coach Bohlen, but your team had to go through something like that. You know what I mean? Because I know one of my friends, I'm not going to say his name, went through a similar experience like that this year in his quarterfinal game where it was 8-on-5 from the jump. So, yeah, I hate saying stuff like that, man.
That's where you really, you know, obviously it hurts us because of how much we put into it. But, you know, I'm going to be coaching next year. You know, a lot of these kids aren't going to get that game back. And that's where you really feel for and to be honest with you, that's where I really get heated with the referees. You know, it's like these kids are playing, you know, once in a lifetime experiences, and you guys are putting your stamp on their game. And that, you know, the best referees are the ones you never see. And that's, you know, and that's the way it should be.
More to the story, don't go to Baltimore.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I mean, those are the kinds of things, unfortunately, that, you know, you want to treat them as much as you know, as teachable moments as you possibly can. You know, but when you got a kid in the locker room at Perry Hall crying, you know, after his last game, it's hard to think of all those teachable points.
Yeah. I hate to bring back a bad memory, but you know, it's always. I like listening to coaches and just asking them about certain games, because I know after every loss we second guess ourselves. But, you know, everybody has them games that you can't even watch. You can't even watch it.
Yeah. No,
you know what I mean?
think and those are the kinds of things I think too. We as coaches, we're way too hard on ourselves. It's like if I can't forgive myself for not calling a timeout against Blake, or for calling a timeout against Perry Hall, then I'm never going to be able to go back and watch that film and learn from it. You know, so it's like we got to, you know, take the same approach to our development as we try and do with our kids' development. You know, we want everything to be teachable moments for the kids, but we also got to take everything as teachable moments for us too, so that we can better serve the next group that comes along.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that answer, and we're going to send it off to Coach O at Bladesburg High School.
Well, thank you so much for making me go back to 2018.
My bad, bro.
No, it's fine. Because and the person that you talk about, Will, I did experience something similar to that, if not the same thing. 3 technical fouls in the first half, and like you said, I usually don't speak.
I ain't want to call your name. Or I just said good friend, but you know, you said it.
Yeah, no, it's fine, because I like what Coach Bohlen said is you're not taking nothing from me. You're messing around with the children, and if you're anything religious like myself, you know that the children of God's people, you know, God relies on this. Children are special, you know, because they're following our lead as adults. And to take something from them or to have them shorthanded in a deal like that, you use it as a learning experience. But at the same time, you got to understand what comes with that as well, because you just got to have a fair shake. So, Coach Bohlen, we want to say thank you. But before you go, we always spin it at the end. So now the floor is going to be yours. You get to ask a question or two to any coach on the panel and pick their brain or anything that you want to ask from them.
Wow. This could take a while. Coach John.
I'm here.
What would you say the first or the most important lesson you've learned as a coach in your first couple of years over there at Parkdale?
Just two things. Just meeting kids where they're at. Having like to start over was one of the biggest lessons. Sometimes you don't think that you're going to have to like start completely over, but just trying to understand, even though I'm right from the area, just understanding the culture of the school, understanding the dynamics, and just meeting kids where they are, and not having the greatest expectations and trying just to make the best of your situation. I think that was like the biggest involvement from my first year and my second year, and that translated to this year. And it's like it never was about me. I think you stated it. I made sure I try to take my ego all the way out of it and just try to be directly for the kids. Coming in, you want to prove yourself, and you want to say, I want to win X amount of games, or I want to prove to everybody I can coach. I had to take that mindset away and just focus on the kids' development and just like pour everything I had into the kids and making sure my kids had. I have long nights last year of just like, man, how are we losing these games, and thinking it's me, and thinking that I can coach well enough to make any team win. I think some coaches, there's a few coaches out here that think, give me 5 kids and we're in the game, win the ball game. It always doesn't work that way. And you just have to take your ego out of it and erase your ego and just, rely on the work that you put in on a day-to-day basis. So when I first came in, I believe that, man, I coached a lot of kids. We can win. I know how to win a ball game. Like, these other kids aren't that talented. I know how to, find deficiencies of other kids. And, I had to erase that mindset and just focus on, going to work every day. And that's from, in the summertime, in the fall, just putting my kids in about 5 or 6 summer leagues, being in depth. Coach Chuck called me like, Coach John, you got 75. I'm like, man, I owe Berry Farms $125. Like, but just doing that and just trying to focus on the work and just, try to take myself out of it and just giving everything I had to the kids. That was the biggest lesson I think I learned in my first 2 years.
Cool. Coach Wade.
Yes, sir.
How did your first year either meet your expectations coming in or surpass them, or what kinds of expectations did you have coming in, or were you able to accomplish some of the things you wanted to in year one?
I think we had an overall good year. And kind of like you said, it's not like a straight line of what you expect, man. I mean, people don't know we had a lot of ups and downs in our season internally, just with, the new guy coming over, and this is the way they have been doing things. So just that transition and trying to build a culture. I mean, people got to understand that culture doesn't happen fast. Changing that culture. Even after the first season, we kind of had a coaches meeting, and we said the culture is still not set, because now you have to continue to grow this thing, and you haven't had the guys that kind of can repeat, because they still learning us even after year one, because essentially the season's like 4 or 5 months. So we're still trying to grow the program, and I feel like we put our personal expectations on ourselves, and I guess I can say we met them. But that's a tricky question, because there's some games that we let slip away. We went on 7-game winning streak, then up 16 against Churchill, lose, and then we go on another 7-game winning streak. So it's a lot of integral things in there that I think we have a lot of growth. We still have to grow in so many ways. But I think overall we had a good year. And that's only to the eye. I mean, somebody else might say, man, you guys didn't have a good year. So,
right. The interesting thing that I've found too, and this is something I've got to constantly remind myself, is Coach Wooden at UCLA would always start every season with teaching the kids how to tie their shoes. And I'm like, what in the world is at UCLA? The first lesson you teach kids every year is how to tie their shoes. And it just constantly reminds me that culture is something we have to fight for every day. That it's something that we can't assume that because you've been with me as a freshman, now you're a senior, that you get the culture. I think this is one of the things I let slip this year was I assumed that this is year 5. All these kids have been a part of the program, that they would defend the culture internally. And I didn't think I did a very good job from an outside standpoint of defending our culture, our one heart core values. It's something that you constantly have to fight for. It's something I read a book called Extreme Ownership by a former Navy SEAL. Was just absolutely mind-blowing as far as all the things that leaders are responsible for. And if you take ownership of that and you say, you know what, it is my fault that we weren't working as hard as we should have, then you start to go about finding solutions for that. And that's one of the great things that's been about this time, is that we finally have some time to sit back and decompress and look at the season and say, hey, look, these are all the things we did poorly. These are all the things we did well. This is where we have to build. This is where we have to grow as a staff, as players. But that culture thing is always something that I've always found amazing. We think square one is here, when square one is like, way back here somewhere. And we always have to start with square one.
yeah, for sure.
All right, Coach Chuck, can I borrow that trophy you got? I just want to take a picture of it so I can post it and say, look at me. I can do all that whole, posting the highlights.
You'll earn one soon enough, man. I got lucky. I'll tell you that.
I don't know about that. But I mean, shoot, we could talk hoops all day, fellas. I don't want to keep you guys. But
yeah, we definitely appreciate you. I mean, it's great to actually hear you, and we don't get to see each other because we got to wash our hands, stay 6 feet apart, social distancing, So I mean, it's great to do this every day that we do this, man. I just want to say thank you to you from the behalf of the panel, from the dry erase board panel. We want to say thank you. We knew that this was going to be a special one.
Yeah, sure.
So we want to say thank you, Coach B. Appreciate you.
Well, listen, fellas, this is a phenomenal platform. You guys this is exactly what kind of coaching community I think we should all be a part of, where we're all just getting together and exchanging ideas, and then we meet on the court and see whose team is best that day. And this is really what it's all about, so this is exactly the kind of stuff that we all should be doing at this time to really turn this negative into a positive. And I can't thank all of you guys enough for everything that you contributed to my season this past year, and hopefully to all the things that we're going to be working on together, over the next few years, trying to help these kids as best we can.
Hey, Coach Bohlen, man, love you, man. You my guy. But answer your phone when I call you, man.
I tell you what, man, with these kids at home, man, the schedule's all off.
I know you busy, man, but I think you at least answer for me.
Open J's and the open run. If we talking about breaks and shooters filling lanes, all my dogs is down for war. You can tell how they train. Coaching players, they learn from each other. If the roles are earned, it's Jason Kidd, we assist one another. Making strides for a ship in the regular season. Lacing up these nights, a band of brothers turn into some demons. Through the season, spring the fall, we gon' see who is working. When the winter hit the surface, gon' see who deserve it.